This week in the Triangle, I'm Stephen Horn, an independent journalist, and we're here to talk about some local news here in our neck of the woods in North Carolina. And tonight we have a couple stories here. We have stories from Wake County, Chatham County, and Franklin County. So let's get into it. So first off, we have a story related to the Wake County School Board. The Wake County Public School System is opening I believe, a new elementary school. This is in the eastern part of the county, and it is right in an unincorporated community named Lizard Lick. So naturally, the Wake County School Board ran a poll of the community saying, "What should we name What should we name this elementary school? Should we call it Lizard Lick? Should we call it Marshburn Road?" After the road, or should we call it Fall Branch, which I believe is a nearby creek or stream? So the community, 52% of them voted for Lizard Lake. Okay, this is a majority. There's a big margin over, only a quarter which voted for the next most popular option. But the Wake County Board of Education, in their almighty wisdom, decided to throw out the Democratic results, throw out the will of the people, and instead choose the second most popular option. Why? Because Lizard Lick is known for being the name of a reality TV series that was built around a local company, Lizard Lick Towing. So apparently they don't want that connotation, even though the people of the area who voted in this survey were fine with it. Now, this happened to be a party line vote. Obviously, the Democrats have the majority of the Wake County School Board, since Wake County is pretty heavily Democrat. But since they are elected by district, there are two Republicans on the Wake County Board of Elections, and one of them, Cheryl Caulfield, is actually, this school is in her district, and she voted against choosing the second most popular name, saying, "I'd hate to go back on that after we gave them the choice of giving their opinion." That is my opinion as well. What is the point of soliciting community feedback if you aren't going to listen to it? You might as well just say, "Hey, here's our decision," instead of giving people the illusion of democracy when you, as Democrats, are going to simply choose whatever you want to choose anyway. This is sort of a lighthearted story to start us off with, because the next story is much heavier, and that is in relation to one of the Amber Alerts that was sent out last week. Was in regards, well, I guess this was 2 weeks ago. It was in regards to a 15-year-old girl who disappeared from Siler City. And it was initially believed that she left voluntarily, but the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation was able to do some electronic surveillance. Not exactly sure what that was. Maybe some social media accounts, maybe some surveillance video. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but they decided, hey, she left in the company of these two men. We are going to send out a statewide Amber Alert. And she was eventually recovered with a man in nearby Ashboro. So that man and another, I guess, co-conspirator have been charged in relation to this kidnapping. And it turns out both of those men are Hispanics who are in this country illegally. So Ronnie Suarez, who has been charged, is from Venezuela. He has an outstanding warrant already for removal from the country, and he is also facing charges in a similar incident in Colorado. Okay, so this is someone who's been charged multiple times with kidnapping and sexual-related offenses, assault-related offenses. He is still in the country. He has an outstanding warrant, but currently he is in jail on these Chatham County charges. Both of these individuals are being held without bond. Looks like my camera might be glitching a little. That's odd. So sorry about that. So the second of these two alleged kidnappers is Saul Ramirez Guevara. He is from El Salvador, and he is also reported to be in the country illegally. He was deported in 2015, but he has made it back into the country and is alleged to be involved in this sexual offense, this kidnapping. So this is a 15-year-old girl. I did not see their ages in the reporting. But as we can see from the mug shots, these are adults. Both of them reported to be in the country illegally, who were involved with this 15-year-old girl who disappeared for a week before she was found by the police. Our next story is up in Franklin County, and this story has a whole bunch of twists and turns, and it starts with a Bunn police patrol officer named Phyllis Johnson. So on November 14th of last year, she issued a civil citation for driving 37 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and she issued this to a man named Randall White. Now, Randall White is reported to be the nephew of an elected official here in Franklin County. Or I guess they're in Franklin County. I'm nearby, but not quite in Franklin County. And, this, based on the last name, people have been assuming that it is Franklin County Sheriff Kevin White, who that is being referred to. And I got another another tidbit regarding Kevin White coming up. But so she issues this ticket. The driver complains, and eventually, well, I guess not eventually, I believe it is that same day, the police chief withdraws the citation because Johnson is not radar certified. However, Johnson writes a letter saying, I don't issue tickets based on radar. I issue tickets based on my familiarity with the town and, careful observation of how long it takes to get between certain places while driving the speed limit. So if someone is traveling faster than that, I can tell, Police officers don't necessarily need radar to be able to tell that someone is speeding. And so the situation gets even more complicated because so this week the town issued a statement in response. There had been social media posts, a couple local pages on Facebook who were covering it. I believe Franklin County News Online is one of them. Basically sharing this information of what's going on in the community. So the town issued a statement in response, and they say, she was not fired because of this ticket, because of this drop ticket for someone who was reportedly related to an elected official. They say, well, he wasn't related to anyone elected in Bonn, which is true. He's alleged to be related to the Franklin County sheriff, which is obviously much larger than just Bonn. So they said she actually resigned, 2 weeks ago, basically, washing their hands were clean of all of this. And so, but the officer's niece made a post on social media saying, yes, she did resign, but it was because the police chief is racist. So, another whole twist in the story. Oh, now it's being said that the police chief is racist. But what is the strangest to me is that there is a letter of caution, which has been shared online, redacted, which is apparently sent to Johnson after she had resigned. So as stated February 28th. So she reportedly resigned on February 17th. So why is she getting a letter of caution 10 days later, 11 days later, saying, quote, you're violating policy by, quote, speaking with members of the Bunn community concerning unsubstantiated claims concerning another employee. So if she's leaving the department, why is she getting letters of caution about apparently what she's saying to members of the Bunn community? Whole thing seems a little messed up. And potentially there's even more going on than just what is here. Maybe there is some deeper issue. Maybe there really is some racism, or maybe these accusations of racism are just being thrown around to cover up some personnel issue. So who knows? But that is, what's going on in a very small town in Franklin County. And as I mentioned, I appear to have possibly gotten into an unintentional beef with Franklin County Sheriff Kevin White. Now, as some of y'all may remember, last week we covered Operation Kila, where they arrested 17 drug dealers, or 17 alleged drug dealers, in an operation, a multi-agency operation, which has involved Franklin County Sheriff's Department, as well as the Wake County Sheriff, the state, federal agencies, as well as local police departments. So naturally, I make a post about it, and I include a screen. I include this lovely, beautiful graphic I made with 14 out of the 17 mugshots. Those are all the mugshots I was able to find in the Wake County mugshot lookup, which is, sort of the easiest to access. You can very easiest system to look up mugshots in Wake County. So out of these out of these 17 defendants, the 14 mugshots I was able to find, I notice they have something in common, and I am never one to not uh, to not say my noticings out loud. Um, so I made this little tweet, got a couple likes, and apparently Sheriff Kevin White or someone at his office saw it. So he responded, but he did not respond by replying to me or tagging me, but he did make a post. And in this post, he said, "My critics will always hate on me for calling out criminals. They will tell you I am racist, hateful, and divisive. The truth is, I am only prejudiced against those that wish to inflict harm on the people who call our great community home." So, why do I think this post is in reference to me? Well, we can see that he took the graphic I made and added a couple. Well, we can't really see it here, but he took the graphic I made and added the 3 mugshots that I was not able to find. So obviously, someone saw my post, took the graphic that I was made, added a little addendum, and made that post. So, Sheriff White, if you're watching this, I don't think you're racist. I don't think it's racist to arrest black criminals if they're actually committing the crimes they're accused of. In fact, if anyone is racist in this situation, it is the black criminals who are harming race relations and perpetuating stereotypes by committing crime at rates disproportionate to their population in society. I can't control that. Sheriff White can't control that. What is he supposed to do? Just ignore crime that is committed by black people because he already filled up his DEI quota for the month? No, of course not. So, of course, I hold no ill will to him. If he thinks I'm one of those criticizing him for being racist or divisive, I am not. But I am also not going to. Well, I think I'll leave it there. Um, I if other people want to criticize Sheriff White, they can, but I think in this case, I'm actually on his side. So, I hope my posts and my intentions were not misconstrued in any way. So, back to the real news. Um, we have a couple protests. One thing that I've started including in the weekly newsletter that I send out is a little protest watch, sort of keeping tabs on what people are protesting and what they're interested in. So we had 2 anti-Trump protests this week. It seems sort of interesting, the anti-immigration enforcement protests with all the Mexican flags and Guatemala and El Salvador, whatnot. Those seem to have died down. Maybe I'm just not seeing them anymore, but there doesn't seem to be as many of those. But the anti-Trump, sort of the more political, from not from the Hispanics, but from the just generic Democrats, they're going strong. So this week we had 2 of those here in Raleigh, and both of these protests are part of national movements. So the first one was with the 50-51, which referred to 50 states, I guess 50 capitals one day. So they had their first rally. It was nationwide. Second rally nationwide. Now they're on their 3rd rally nationwide this week. So they called it a people's picnic at the North Carolina Capitol building, as well as Capitol buildings across the country. And once again, yeah, if you look at the imagery from this event, you have lots of anti-Trump, anti-Musk specifically, anti-Doge. They really don't like what they're doing with the Department of Government Efficiency. They really don't like that they're cutting spending. And once again, you have some of this violent messaging in regards to delay, defend, depose, referencing the assassination of the healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. That is some messaging. It's not necessarily prominent messaging at these events, but it is a common thread that I've noticed in watching, looking at the images from these events, that's a common theme that a small minority of people at these events have been pushing, and apparently not not getting pushback from the other attendees around them. So, you can make of that what you will. Protests have different levels of top-down coordination. Some protests you attend, if you have something that is off brand, off message, they'll ask you to put it away or leave. Others have more of a, hey, this is our message for the protest, but people can kind of, come with whatever. I don't know exactly the strictness of these protests, so it doesn't necessarily mean anything other than that, very small minority who are in fact putting out this message: delay, defend, depose, assassination themed messaging. But it is I think notable that there is some small minority that is still celebrating that apparently that assassination really resonated with them, and they might not have the guts to do any assassination themselves, but they are signaling that they approve of that. And so the other anti-Trump protests, um, in Raleigh this week was attended by one of the speakers was the Democratic Congresswoman Deborah Ross, who represents Wake County, most of Wake County, the second congressional district for the state in Congress. She was one of the speakers, and this rally was specifically relating to the science cuts. So a lot of the grants, we've covered some of it before, that the grants were for absolutely ridiculous stuff. Often, most of it DEI coded. So, they say, oh, we're going to study. One of the ones that comes to mind that we've covered is, studying the usage of menthol cigarettes in the Black and LGBT communities. Okay. Very specific niche things where they would get funding if they said that they had some sort of DEI motive, where they're studying some minority things, some LGBTQ things. So Trump has been cutting a lot of grants, cutting a lot of funding. I know there's lawsuits still working through the system, so I guess we'll eventually see how much actually gets cut. But as we can see, the Democrats not fond of this, and I might do some further reporting on this. But apparently, there are a lot of government jobs in the triangle that are related not to state or local government, but to the federal government, where they're getting grants for foreign overseas aid. I believe there's Research Triangle International, has been cutting jobs. They're a big recipient of grants. So, Trump making cuts in Washington, saying, hey, let's not spend so much federal tax dollars, federal borrowed dollars, federal inflation dollars on this huge amount of spending locally and overseas, has resulted in some residents of the Triangle losing their jobs. And that is it for tonight. If you've tuned in, appreciate this. I keep forgetting to say this, but you can head over to thisweekinthetriangle.com, sign up, get this news as a newsletter in your inbox every week. Also publish original articles. That's also where you can go if you want to support me. Thisweekinthetriangle.com. Thanks for tuning in.